Good morning, everybody. This is an unusual 5 Fact Friday. I'm against the clock. I've got to be out of here shortly, and I haven't got time to do the newsletter, so I'll be sending this video out by newsletter to all the newsletter subscribers. But this couldn't go untalked about. So forgive me while I just make myself my coffee, which is important to have. And while I get the live stream going on Instagram too. There we go. Right, good morning. Happy Friday, everyone. How are you? It's Friday the 1st of November, 2024. We're still taking stock of the extent of the impact of the budget. And I'm going to get straight into talking about the effect of the budget on the housing market. Now, leading up to the budget, both the housing market itself, the health of the housing market, by which I mean transaction volumes and transaction times. I'm not discussing prices yet. I will discuss prices at the end of the video. The housing market was showing tentative signs of a recovery. It was showing mortgage approval volumes going up, transaction volumes gradually going up. Nothing huge, but it was showing a recovery from the 2023 market that was very bad. 2024 has been a better market in terms of market health. Although, as fragile as it has been, it's also been frustratingly long transaction times. Very, very difficult chains to hold together. Much harder than usual to hold chains together. It's been really a difficult market. And that's difficult for everybody involved. It's difficult for buyers and sellers and agents. But it was improving. There was definitely an underlying improvement, and there was a little bit of confidence returning within the industry itself, not necessarily with buyers and sellers, but there was confidence in it. And I think this budget has just killed that recovery stone dead. I think this budget is going to be incredibly bad for the housing market's health. Not prices, not talking about prices. I'm talking about how well oiled the housing market is. Everybody knows that moving house is very difficult and very stressful and very time consuming and very expensive. And all of those things just got worse because of this budget. And I'll explain why. I'm going to go through 5 facts. Okay, so these are the 5 facts. This is 5 Fact Friday by video, not newsletter, in no particular order. I'm going to talk about the stamp duty increase on second homes and buy-to-let that went up overnight after the budget. I'm going to talk about the fact that mortgage rates have already gone up as a result of the budget. I'm going to talk about the fact that the employer's national insurance contributions is going to hurt the unemployment numbers and is going to make demand weaker. I'm going to talk about the fact that social house building, which is the only solution to the housing crisis, and what the budget's done for that. And I'm going to talk about first-time buyers and other buyers, not second home buyers, but first-time buyers or only home buyers and the stamp duty change. So there were 3 stamp duty changes, and there's a lot of confusion about those stamp duty changes. So, fact number 1, which has had the most immediate impact on the housing market, was that stamp duty on the purchase of a second property or of the purchase of a buy-to-let property went up from 3% to 5% overnight. Now that's a tax, that's a moving tax or a purchase tax on top of the standard stamp duty tax. Okay, it isn't just that. So you pay whatever the other stamp duty is on the transaction, and then if it's a second home or a buy-to-let, you also pay what was a 3% surcharge. Effectively, is now a 5% surcharge. That happened overnight yesterday, and yesterday all I heard from agents was transactions falling apart, chains falling apart. And the worst thing is in a long chain of 3 or 4 or 5 transactions, which is not uncommon, just one person who is forced out of their transaction because they simply cannot stretch to that extra stamp duty means everyone's transactions get delayed, the chain breaks, and it's back to square one to find another way to link that chain back up. So the workload for agents has just gone off the charts. Their workload's gone up, their income's gone down. They're going to be having a difficult time for a while. Good morning, Keobats. So the immediate effect of that stamp duty increase is to have damaged existing chains and transactions that were in process. A lot of buyers pulling out. And what I recommended yesterday is that if you are a buyer in a purchase of a second home or a buy-to-let home, and you'd still like to, but you now no longer can because of the new stamp duty surcharge, I recommend that you talk to the agent and or the seller and ask if you can split the difference. So if, for example, there's an extra, £5,000 of stamp duty on your purchase, ask the seller if they would agree to reduce the price by £2,500. That is a fair, and so what you're saying is, look, I'll pick up £2,500 of this unexpected increase. You pick it up too. It's the cost of the transaction. There is no reason why one or other should bear the whole thing. It is unreasonable of a buyer to say to the seller, you must now drop your price by £5,000 to cover the cost of my purchase. That's unreasonable. That's making the seller take all of the pain of the stamp duty increase. Similarly, there's no reason why a seller should say to a buyer, it's not my problem, stamp duty is a buyer's problem, so you've got to pay all of it. Either of those two approaches is likely to lead to the deal failing. And I recommend that it's easier for everyone to keep the deal on the road, to go, you know what, this came out of the nowhere overnight. We'll split the burden of that extra and move on. I recommend that very, very strongly. Do not let the sense of annoyance with the budget be the thing that derails your transaction, which you then later look back and go, oh, we should have just agreed to that, shouldn't we? So that's fact number one. The second homes and buy-to-let stamp duty increase has instantly hit transactions. And the second thing it will do is it will put some slightly downward pressure on prices now. Not because buyers don't want to pay what they were paying before, but because they now have an additional cost to factor in, and that will affect buyers' budgets and therefore sale prices of properties that are being sold as a second home or a buy-to-let. Right, that's fact number one. Fact number two, the gilt mark, so the 10-year gilts, the government bond, right? So the British government's bond yield has gone up to higher than after the Liz Truss mini budget. Okay, you can check out the facts for yourself. Yesterday evening, at the end of the day, they were at 4.4%, and I think the highest it got with the Liz Truss mini budget was 4.3%. That's the gilt yields. That has forced the swaps market to also see its rates go up, and that was why there have been multiple mortgage lenders pulling products off the shelf so that they can reprice them and put them back on the shelf, and so mortgage rates are going up. That is another immediate consequence of this budget, which was not intended or foreseen by anybody, and as a result of a reaction of the bond market as they begin to realize that the grown-ups are not in charge again, sadly. And that's going to, again, mortgage rates going up is going to just, that recovery of demand was just looking to start improving again. Not prices, just demand, buyer activity, more people taking out mortgages. And this is going to push that back down again, making transactions even harder to happen. So that's fact number two, mortgage rates going up. They haven't shot up massively, but people were hoping they were going to keep going down. They're not. They've gone back up. And let's wait and see what happens in the coming weeks. It's pretty unpredictable. Number three. And this, I think, will go down as Rachel Reeves' biggest mistake of this budget, because this is what's going to lead to, I think, an acceleration in the weakening of the economy. Was the decision to increase employers' national insurance contributions by 1.2% up to 15%. I've been watching very carefully, and everywhere. Yes, there are some businesses that are doing very well and won't be very affected by this, but most businesses, bearing in mind that for most businesses, the conditions have got harder in the last couple of years. Most businesses are going to be affected by this. At best, it's going to kill off pay rises. It's going to kill off wage growth, or it's going to negatively affect wage growth. And wage growth in the long term is the number one correlation with house prices. So it's going to hit buyers' budgets because of wages not going up as fast as before. Secondly, it's already been causing job layoffs. There have already been mostly small and medium businesses just saying this is a very big hit. The combination of national insurance increase and minimum wage increases puts the overall bill up to a point that makes some businesses no longer viable without having to lay off staff. So we're going to see job losses. It's not going to feed through into the figures for some time. And I bet you when it does start to happen, and it will, right, you'll start to see official unemployment figures going up. It'll be several months from now before it actually gets into the data. And by then they'll be saying, oh, it's something else. It wasn't the budget, but it is the budget. It's definitely will cause a bump in unemployment. And unemployment going up hits everything. It's not just the poor person who's lost their job. It's the effect on the taxpayer, the effect on councils, because they're now going to be on benefits. It's just a sort of multiple negative effect. And Rachel Reeves's statement that she's trying to find growth and trying to create growth in the economy, her decisions show that she doesn't understand where growth comes from, because growth only comes from growing businesses, and businesses don't grow unless their revenue and their income and their profits are growing. Okay? Prosperity doesn't exist unless there are businesses flourishing. Prosperity is when we all do better because the economy is thriving. So employment picks up, wages go up, everyone's doing better. Rich and poor and everyone in the middle is doing better. Okay? You never see a rise in prosperity when businesses are suffering. You just never do, because businesses are the people who pay wages and employ people. And if they're employing fewer people and not putting wages up as much, or lowering wages even, like Volkswagen is doing in Germany, by the way, it's going to hit the economy. It's going to hit jobs. That's going to hit the housing market. Not just on prices, on transactions. So fact number 3, the employers' national insurance contributions, I think not overnight, but in the next 3 to 6 months, will have one of the biggest negative impacts on the housing market, activity, transactions, and on the economy. Number 4, social house building. There were 2 little bits of good news, but actually overall what's happened is that the government and Rachel Reeves have demonstrated that they have no idea as to the scale of the problem of the shortage of social housing. Because both of the measures that they announced, which was ending right to buy discounts or reducing right to buy discounts, which is a good thing. That's a good thing. But it's not going to move the needle on the housing crisis overall. It's going to stop the sale of so many of these social homes. And this, we're going to put in $500 million or $1 billion into buy homes. We're going to build thousands of social homes. That is a drop in the ocean. There need to be hundreds of thousands. And this isn't an opinion fact. The government has legal obligations to house certain people. Okay? It's not a choice. Unless the law changes, it is the government's obligation to do it. And the government has to use taxpayer money to pay for that. £1.7 billion a year currently paying for people in temporary accommodation. It's just one example of how we, the taxpayers, are affected when the government doesn't have enough social housing to meet its own legal housing obligations. Doesn't matter who's going in there, it costs the same. Okay? So it's like saying, hey, we're going to fix social housing because we're going to build 5 homes when 5,000 are needed. I mean, it is that scale of magnitude. It's 100, not 1,000, but it should have been 100 times more. If they had said, we are going to put down £10 billion and build 100 or 200,000 social homes, that would have been significant, but still not enough. But what they've done, above all else, has demonstrated that they don't understand what the social housing shortage crisis is costing the economy, people's lives, people's prospects, and the taxpayer. They do not understand it. because nothing other than a massive social house building program solves the housing crisis. I'll do another video to explain why, but I promise you, until the government builds enough social homes to meet its own government housing obligations, the housing crisis will not go away. That's number 4, right? So social homes. Number 5 is the other stamp duty changes. So there are 3, and please, so many first-time buyers, especially on TikTok. Well, I don't understand this. Where do people on TikTok live? Because they don't appear on any other social platforms. Seem to be only on TikTok, and they have a completely different collective intelligence, shall we say, where I've been called a liar because there's no change in first-time buyer stamp duty. It's only second homes. You weren't listening, Charlie. You're an idiot. Honestly, I can't. Just the pushback on TikTok of me reporting the fact of the budget has been amazing. They clearly don't watch it. Anyway, that's not all of my TikTok followers, by the way, but that's the only place I've been getting that ridiculous pushback. Like, no, you're wrong. There's no change in first-time buyers. There really is. So one of the expectations of the budget was whether or not Rachel Reeves would extend the temporary first-time buyer stamp duty threshold that the Tories lifted from 300,000 up to 425,000, which is due to end on the 31st of April. Okay, so that means that if you're a first-time buyer up until the 31st of March, if you complete by then, you don't pay any stamp duty. As of the 1st of April, that threshold drops from 425,000 down to 300,000. So just by way of example, if you were buying a £425,000 first home, and I know that there are people in the north who go, what? Who's buying it for? In the southeast, that's about the average, right? London average first-time buyer price is above £500,000, and the southeast is 350,000, £380,000 roughly. Okay, so it's an extra £6,000 roughly of stamp duty if you're paying £6,250 if you are buying a property at £425,000. That changed. So we now know, because there was uncertainty before the budget, we now know that Rachel Reeves is not going to extend that threshold level where it is now. She's going to allow it to fall back down to 300,000. That is going to increase the costs for first-time buyers, on top of the fact that mortgage prices are going to go up as well. So it's going to depress demand from first-time buyers after the 1st of April next year. Okay, that's one change. And the other change is this: for other buyers who are not buying, it's not their first time, maybe it's their second time buying their only home, not the same as buying a second home, right? Buying a second home means you've got one and you also buy another one, so you now own 2 homes. The second home's stamp duty increase affects those people. If you're selling your first home so that you can buy your second home, you no longer get the first-time buyer stamp duty exemption. And the stamp duty threshold for those, a second purchase as opposed to a second home, was temporarily lifted to 250,000. That's going to drop right back down to 125,000. So for anyone selling to buy, stamp duty costs increase on the 1st of April next year. Yet more cost, difficulty, and opposition to moving. Stamp duty is a tax on moving, right? It is a tax on moving. It's a terrible, terrible tax. It's not about who should or who shouldn't pay it. There just shouldn't be any taxes on moving, okay? Because moving stimulates the whole economy. If more people move, I mean, literally, you could double the number of home moves in this country if you took away stamp duty. Stamp duty prevents people from downsizing, and that's going to get worse after the 1st of April next year. So every single measure that she went through, right? Second home and buy-to-let stamp duty increasing. The gilt markets, her overall budgets put mortgage rates up. Employers' national insurance contributions going up. First-time buyer stamp duty threshold going back down. And other purchase stamp duty also going back down. Every single one of those depresses housing transactions. And that makes it harder and more expensive and more stressful for everyone who wants to move, as if it wasn't bad enough already. So I think this is arguably the worst budget for the housing market that I can remember off the top of my head. I mean, there might, if I go back far enough, be ones that's worse, but I can't remember that. Now, there was also, and this is not a bad thing, there was no new stimulus for buyers. There was no new support for first-time buyers. And you might hear me say that and go, what, Charlie? But I thought you were supposed to help people get... When you provide artificial stimulus to first-time buyers, it artificially inflates prices and makes homes more expensive for everyone else. So it is a good thing that there's no help to buy, all right? Yeah. There's nothing good in this budget. They aren't even pretending it either. And Rachel Reeves is now admitting that working people are going to feel part of the burden of the budget. She's now admitted it in TV interviews. Honestly, this is a bad budget. And it's not like an explosive overnight bad budget. It's going to be like sudden onset, rapid decay of the economy. And this is, so I was talking to some agents yesterday, and there are a lot of agents who have this sort of very good positive mental attitude, which is, it's okay, people still need to move, people are still going to move. Yes, that's true. But they're going to have less money to do it, there are going to be fewer of them, and it's going to take longer. And it's going to be harder work for agents to help the people who are moving to move. So that doesn't help anything either. Right. Okay, guys. Any quick questions? Otherwise, I'm going to have to shoot off because someone's arriving here in a minute. Someone's going to walk through that door any moment now. Any quick questions? Yeah, there are already price drops happening in the property market. This is one more thing, okay? If you're thinking to yourself, great, if this means house prices, I did say I'd talk about house prices, all of these measures are going to have a downward influence on house prices overall. I'm not saying by how much, but none of these moves improve house price growth. And you might be thinking, well, that's great news because that improves affordability, right? If house prices were coming down on their own without these measures, yes, that would be improving affordability. But none of these measures improve affordability. They all make it worse. So what's going to happen is sellers are going to get less, but buyers still have to pay more. The government gets an increase in tax, sellers and buyers lose. Sorry, guys, I'm saying it's a bad budget for the housing market. I'm not here to discuss the overall everything else, but I haven't. Someone's here saying I'm a small business owner and I would say it's a good budget. Could you explain why, Nick? Because yeah, I mean, I would welcome that if there are small businesses who think this is a good budget. Explain why, because I'm not aware of that. In the context of the housing market and employment, because employment is what underpins the housing market. Yeah, that's true. Aldo Urbana says minimum wage increases also puts more people into income tax threshold, more ways to drain money from businesses. Yeah. And actually, very small businesses, the very smallest, there's been a slight increase in relief for businesses that don't have to pay national insurance at all. There are some small businesses where that is true. That's true. And I think there's about 800,000 businesses. But the overall effect of that on the economy as a whole, the proportion effect on that is very, very small. For most small businesses, this has increased the tax burden. It depends exactly how small you are. Yeah. So yeah, okay. Yeah, that's a fair point, Nick. For the smallest businesses, employer allowance has increased to 10,500. But for other businesses, they've reduced the allowance from 9,500 to 5,000. That is a painful increase. So yeah, if you're one of those very small businesses, yeah, that's not a bad thing. I agree with that. But that's the only measure that is a positive one. And in scale terms, it's tiny compared to the negative effect of the rest of the budget. Yeah, this is very true. Ikea, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, says, I'd like to leave my 4-bedroom house and move into a 2-bedroom flat because I live alone. Right. That makes sense, right? But one, stamp duty adds a huge amount to the move. And two, you'd be moving out of a leasehold and into a freehold. Sorry, other way around. You'd be moving out of your freehold and into a leasehold. So there we are. There's someone who's living alone in a 4-bed house, would like to downsize, but leasehold and stamp duty make it unattractive. I get that. I get that. Yeah, Rebecca Nicola says, if a care company can go out of business in Cornwall with a very high elderly population, I don't know what's safe anymore. Ikaya also says, you will never have enough social homes, as everyone will prefer a sub-market rent if it's available. Yeah, but that's a separate point, and that can be legislated against. You can very easily make it so that social homes are available first and foremost to people who have to be housed by the government. Because at the moment, the problem is that the government can't meet its own housing obligations in the social sector, so it's using the private rented sector and taking up supply away from tenants who are paying higher prices. And that is the number one cause of tenants paying higher prices. It is not landlords being greedy. It is not people setting a price they want. The market sets the price. Landlords can't just name their price. The market won't pay it, right? The reason your rents are so high is because there aren't enough social homes. Sorry, guys, that's the truth. And all of the renters' rights demand, all of the things that are happening in the renters' rights bill, or so many of them, are going to make rents go up higher. And you can spell it out, you can prove it mathematically. And you do that to some of these guys, and they're like, la, 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 no. Landlords are just rich and greedy, and I just want lower rents, and I just demand lower rents. But I don't like landlords, and I want to rent from someone who's not a landlord. I mean, literally, that's their logic. I want to be a tenant with rights, but I don't think there should be landlords. It's just, you can't deal with that. Ahmed Matan says, with this new budget, would first-time buyers be better off waiting until April 2025 if they're happy to wait to buy, as they won't be affected by the new stamp duty if buying under 300,000? Okay, interesting question. So if you're buying under 300,000, will you be better off waiting until then? Well, there's two conflicting forces there. So in a way, if you wait until then, there might be more property available. But I also think that between now and then, those buyers who are in the process are going to slightly hurry up. So you'll see a slight increase in people wanting to avoid stamp duty. If you haven't already begun, you're likely too late. There's only 5 months, and 5 months is the average transaction time once a deal's been agreed. But if you haven't started viewing yet and haven't started offering yet, then you're nowhere near that point. So, interesting question. I think that's going to depend on where you are in the country. But also, no, I mean, you're going to end up with more competition at the lower prices as more first-time buyers are forced down lower with their budget by the stamp duty increases. And stamp duty still exists on properties down to, as of the 1st of April, down to £125,000 for other people. Yeah, actually, there's several factors there. That's a very good question. I need to think that through. Because there's quite a few conflicting things. All right, guys. I've got to hit the road. Thanks for watching. Let me just recap. If you are affected by the sudden increase in stamp duty and you don't know what to do, I recommend that the most sensible thing to do is for the buyer and the seller to share the burden of the increase in stamp duty. That gives you the best chance of the deal still going through and holding change together. Okay, it's not reasonable. I mean, I've already heard buyers and sellers go, well, it's not my problem, it's their problem. No, it's both of your problem if the deal falls through, isn't it, you dum-dums? Come on, think about it. You can't, as a seller, go, well, it's a buyer's tax, so they'll have to pay the whole thing themselves. If they're already maxed out on their budget, they can't. They simply can't, and you'll lose your buyer, and you will kick yourself for taking that approach. Similarly, if you're a buyer, you can't expect a seller to drop their price the full amount. So just try and put this what's the word I'm looking for? Confrontational attitude to one side. Everyone benefits if the deal doesn't fall through. The best chance of a deal not falling through is if everyone goes like grown-ups. No one saw this coming. Nobody knew they were going to do stamp duty on second homes and buy-to-lets. Let's just be fair and go, all right, this is the government, half the seller, half the buyer. So if the stamp duty increase is £5,000, the seller should drop 2.5 to allow the buyer to pick up the other 2.5. Okay. And for some of you, if you're buying with mortgages, that's going to require some annoying requoting and repricing, but better that than lose the deal if you want the deal to still go through. All right. Yeah. This is a bad, I mean, for the housing market, which is also social mobility, this is a bad budget. Truly, really bad budget. There's almost nothing in that budget that is helpful to the housing market that I can think of, that I've seen. I wish it weren't so. You know, I mean, if they had decided to scrap stamp duty altogether, I would have been singing, dancing naked on the roof about how good that was going to be, not just for people moving house, but for the whole country, for social mobility, for the economy. It would have been an amazing thing if they'd cut. It would have just been fantastic if they'd done that, even if they'd replaced that tax in other ways. But the trouble is, they're not going to end stamp duty until they also reform council tax. And it's just so complicated. I still can't see any major, you know, they're talking about the end of leasehold, but the government already backpedaling on its leasehold reform commitments. It's already backpedaling. Right, guys. Split the difference, guys. If there's a new unexpected council tax stamp duty, split the difference. Right, I've got to go. But if you want my help, you can book a video one-to-one with me on my website, which is in the link below. MHWC for Moving Home with Charlie. I didn't have my logo up there. There it is. MHWC, Moving Home with Charlie.co.uk. You can join the Movers Private Q&A Club, which gives you direct access to me if you want advice on your move, private messages answered, and twice a month live mover Q&A forums in like a Zoom call. You can book private videos with me. You can also talk to my mortgage brokers and my conveyancers. And if you want to join the Charlie and Stig Club, which, by the way, I'm still feeling the effects of 2 nights ago going through that entire bottle of whiskey with Alex on the Charlie and Stig show. That was a lot of fun. It was a Zoom call, not a live stream. If you're a member of the club and you missed it, I emailed you a link to a recording of most of it yesterday. Check your spam folder if you can't see that email. Yeah, that's it. Otherwise, have a great Friday. Have a great weekend. I'll see